Godzilla Minus One is a continued departure of the campiness of what Godzilla used to be, and this movie is definitely a work of art. If you're a Godzilla fan, you gotta go watch this. If you're a fan of cinema, you have to go watch this. And honestly, if you're expecting a lot of action and you want to see explosions everywhere and you're looking for just really corny humor, don't go watch this. This movie's not for you. And honestly, if that's the type of movies you like, you're probably not for movies either. But seriously, all jokes aside, go watch this movie. It's a story of psychological trauma, of how society and culture can influence people and how coming together can make a change. It's a manifestation of a monster that represents fear and knowing when to face it. And not just that, but how to face it. It is a slow burn, but it's a movie that knows what purpose it's looking for, and it knows how to portray itself to an audience. I always said that the best action scenes, the choreographed scenes, are some of the ones that you can still pick out what's going on no matter what. And even though this movie is not necessarily made for a Western audience, it is still applicable internationally. Did I say that word right? Applicable? Applicable? The message and lesson is heard throughout, and that is the beautiful thing about movies and art, is that they can let you tell these stories to anyone, anywhere. All right, so I gotta jump straight into spoilers, so you've been warned. I already mentioned it before, but Godzilla is more of a representation of fear that's been manifested by, well, our main protagonist's inability to follow through with the orders that were given to him, being a kamikaze pilot, having to kill himself for the greater cause. And I put quotation marks there because, well, at the beginning of the movie, it seems to be a fight that he doesn't care for. He doesn't see that it's worth dying for. And he's not the only one that feels that way. Seems like just the normal run-of-the-mill Japanese citizen didn't really care for the war that they had to be a part of. There's even a line that says you should be proud that you didn't have to serve in a war. This is important because the themes of this movie can be seen in multiple ways. I really do think you can watch this movie at a surface level and just enjoy the fact that there's a monster terrorizing people and then they come together to overcome that monster. But underneath it, looking between the lines, there's such a deep connection that you can make with these characters, or there's something so human about what's going on, of the story of redemption. Someone who lost their honor because they didn't die for something that they didn't believe in, yet society is telling them that they did something disgraceful because, well, they were told that this is how we are supposed to survive. This is how we're supposed to go forward. And because you didn't do this, look at what happened. And it's so easy to see that looking at the state of Japan after the war, looking at how their infrastructure got completely destroyed and how mothers lost their children. And it's all very depressing, and the setting tells just as much of a story as the character himself is telling one. Right from the get-go, we see a plane landing on a really bad runway with a bomb strapped to the bottom of it. Very, very nerve-wracking, thinking, oh man, I don't like how jittery this bomb is shaking. I don't like how close we are to this bomb. Very uncomfortable. Don't want to see this thing blow up because it bounced the wrong way. That opening shot tells you a lot. For those that already know or already see that he's a kamikaze pilot, can put those things together. For those who don't, get a sense of something is off. I feel uncomfortable. I don't like what's happening. And then they are later informed. But exposition is never put in a place where it feels like the characters in the movie are talking to the audience. Anytime the characters are having to give exposition, it's a purpose. The moment we realize our protagonist, Koichi, has kind of done something that he wasn't supposed to do, and you see that he's beginning to feel guilty about it, and how he escaped death, or in his words, cheated death, or at least in the translations that I was watching. Godzilla then appears, showing up as kind of the harbinger of death. Matter of fact, anytime Godzilla is going to appear, he is surrounded by death. fish float up to the surface as they are killed by his presence, and anything he does causes destruction and death. I think it's very important that Godzilla does appear when Koichi feels guilty about escaping death, and Godzilla comes up and shows up like the Grim Reaper, a monster, something that is really just horrifying to look at. They didn't make Godzilla smooth. There's a lot of noise on him, scaly, and just looks like he's covered in plaid armor, like he's just this knight of just pure terror. And normally I would probably complain about something like that, just like how in the Transformer movies there's just a lot of noise and you don't really know what you're looking at, but I feel like that works in this presence with Godzilla because it's overwhelming and you want to feel overwhelmed. The camera's always put at the bottom to make Godzilla feel larger than life, and you always get like close-up versions of him, whether it's his face or maybe it's just his body parts or just his tail. It's always you're always too close to Godzilla. You never really ever get to see a full image of him, and yeah, they'll give you snippets here and there, but it's this, what am I looking at? What is this terror? And I enjoy that. It gives this sense of dread to Godzilla. I appreciate more than anything else that Godzilla is just a force of nature. He's back to being more of a metaphor for the story and the plot than an actual character in the movie that has stakes of his own. And let me tell you, Godzilla's there to fuck shit up. As the story progresses, we see the struggles that Koichi has to deal with, but I'm going to kind of skip the rising action. I'm going to move over to the third act because I think it's important how the movie starts and how the movie ends, and the rising action should just be enjoyed in its own right because it does a lot of things to set up the third act. I love the third act because it basically mirrors the first act, where we had soldiers who were fighting in a war they didn't really believe in and against each other whenever Godzilla appeared, probably at his weakest state. We now have citizens who have come together to fight for something they do believe in, their home and their families, against Godzilla at his best state. Even Koichi, his actions and symbolisms of showing his actions are in reverse, where we saw him landing a plane, running away from a fight. We now see him taking off in a plane, going to the fight. And maybe I'm looking into things just a little bit too much, but I'm gonna throw this in here anyways because I liked what I saw and I hope you guys enjoy what I saw as well. The plane that Koichi is flying at the end is an actual plane that they had for the Japanese fighter pilots. I remember seeing it a long time ago when I was, I don't know, a kid on the History Channel. I'm not doing my research for this review, I'm just going to say that much. But something I do remember is that the plane looked like it flies backwards. It looks like it's in reverse with the propeller in the back, the big wings in the back. It looks like the plane is coming at you with its behind sticking right in your face. For me, I thought that was super symbolic. Not only is Koichi flying a plane that looks like it's backwards, but he's essentially reversing the clock, undoing all the things that brought him dishonor or shame, and really redeeming himself by flying this plane and doing what he kind of feels like he should have done from the get-go, but in reality is what he's finding the strength to do for the right reasons now. Another tidbit is I love how when the people were following orders, that's a big theme here, how like following orders is something that they will do because they have to do it, but they don't like it. A lot of people die. We see that the government sees these people as expendable, and I love that we never actually get to see the government. I love that it's just this force, almost like Godzilla, that is just compelling all of our characters to do these actions, but it isn't until they organize themselves and they fight for themselves that there's not a single casualty that happens. And yeah, it's a nice and great ending with a little pretty bow tied on top of it, and it works because it feels like it was deserved, like they fought for it and they deserve to be happy at the end of everything that they've gone through. The only nitpick I have about this movie is that they hinted that something was going on with Noriko. I hope I'm saying that right, where she had a little bit of Godzilla infestation going on in her neck. And then, I still like that Godzilla was kind of regenerating after the battle, coming back, reborn, probably bigger and badder than ever. But I would have been okay if they didn't show either of those things. and they just let the movie end without there being like, ooh, but here comes a sequel. And maybe there isn't a sequel. Maybe it's just like those fears and stuff never really go away. They will always continue to be there or linger there, but you have to choose to continue to fight them. I don't know. It probably just means there's going to be a sequel, but that's just my one nitpick. Not really a critique, just a nitpick, something I personally didn't like. Overall, this movie can be really in your face with the themes that it's trying to portray, but it also has a lot of subtlety and subtext that carries a long way, with a mirroring image of what happened in the first act to the third act, and enjoying and just struggling with our characters throughout the rising plot. I can't help but recommend this movie to anyone who is just a fan of watching movies, which is why I have to give Godzilla -1 a 10 out of 10. Until next time, play nice.